Batman, welcome back. We're making this a very fun habit. We get to do our first podcast just before the season starts. Nashville 2024, come and gone. What was your take on the show?
I thought it was actually a pretty good show. I've actually been quite impressed with it moving from Vegas. I think scaling it down actually has been kind of nice from what it has been. Getting back to the roots of what SCI was, and which is hunting and fishing. Conservation. I'm not a huge fan of going to these conventions, especially like when I was in Vegas, and you got 17 different vendors trying to get you to buy a case of booze or wine or something goofy, and it just doesn't pertain to the hunting, and that's why I come. So the idea of this is to come to book a hunt, book a fishing trip, learn about what's out there. Possibly take in. I didn't do it this year, but in the past I have taken in. Some of the speeches and stuff like that you can join in on. Like we talked about at dinner last night, Craig Boddington, things like that. There's always some really good information that you can learn at these shows as well. So for a person who doesn't know a lot about different things, hunting in a different country or something of that nature, this is where you need to come. And that's why coming to them I think is very, very important if you want to start branching outside of the country to do more hunts. You can book it. Two, you can learn about where you're going. There's always going to be somebody here that knows a heck of a lot more than you need to really know about that place that you're going to go to.
Smaller though, eh?
Very much smaller.
It felt. I kind of liked it in a sense because this will be my first show from having the perspective of walking around. But I felt it was a lot smaller, but a lot more intimate. It seemed like there were a lot more conversations going about, and it made it an easier approach for people coming into the outfitters booth and making the conversation and stuff. So, which is always a good thing, I guess.
Yeah, and I do think, again, and that's also that has to do with getting rid of some of the other stuff that really is not a hunting or fishing or conservation booth, Also, Vegas made it a little bit, there's still a pretty good party here. There's still things to do in the nightlife. I mean, you can go out and have a good time. There's plenty of great food, great food in this town. I do think it is far easier to find an Airbnb here than it is in Vegas. I don't think, and I think you can do it actually fairly cheap. I mean, from your hotel to your Airbnb or whatever, you can do that more affordably. And because it's not in Vegas where it is warm all the time and a party town, we're not getting the riffraff.
Yeah.
And by that, I mean, I remember, oh gosh, this is probably, 5 or 6 years ago. I'm going through SCI and this guy and his girlfriend they're probably in their late 20s, and they're in their hotel robe on a scooter, on a handicapped person's scooter, each one of them on one with a bottle of champagne and the little bucket up front, ridiculous.
Yeah.
It was just ridiculous. And I think that's where Vegas was taking that and bringing it back, taking it away from that, bringing it to Nashville, bringing it back to the roots.
Sure.
Yeah. I do think that's a very good thing. As we found out last night, at the end of the show, they announced it's going to be back here again next year.
What's your opinion on that?
Yeah. I think it's good. I think it's good. It's a great location. The only thing that I would ask is, SCI really needs to stop pissing around. Stop telling us all these different things that they're going to do. you know, I'm a life member. I'm a life member. I paid my money. I believe in the organization, and I believe in what we're doing. Give us a little bit of solidification of what we're going to have and when we're going to have it. You know, this thing of, you know, when it was in Vegas, then it started to become a monster in Vegas. Then, oh, well, we're going to take this as a traveling show. Every year it's going to be in a new location. At one point they talked about being in Indianapolis, and it's like, you know, you're serious, Indianapolis in January. Okay, well, we should probably just hit Antarctica while we're at it too. You know, and I mean, it's just not a place that you want to go to in the middle of winter. I get Vegas was an animal that created a monster. But at the same time, you know, Nashville, in fact, yesterday was absolutely beautiful day.
Yeah.
You know, you're going to have some cold days, you're going to have some warm days. I think it's well located in that sense. But then, you know, you turn around to, like, the one thing that they were saying was we're going to go 2 years in Nashville, and that was kind of the last solidification that they had was 2 years Nashville, and then we're going to go 2 years in New Orleans. Well, we already started planning out things.
Yeah.
We were looking at, okay, what can we do next year? We know it's going to be in January. So we walked through and we hit booths for people who had hunts and fishing trips and all those kinds of things in those areas that we knew, okay, let's do this. We'd even talked about setting up a hunt with a good buddy of mine in Lubbock. And then, you know, either going to Lubbock first and doing a little hunt and then coming down to New Orleans.
Yeah.
And then go to, you know, New Orleans back to Arizona or however it was going to be. But we had started to make plans. We understand that it's a year in advance, but to help the people who are coming from other countries that want to come to this show and either sell at this show or attend this show or anything else, they too need to have plans of where it's going to be, when it's going to be, so they know they can investigate what's there. This is not some place you can't go to this show and say, well, hey, what's in New Orleans?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You don't. There's nobody here telling you where you can rent something, what's a good section of town, stay out of that bad section of town. You know, those types of things. So you have to do your investigation, and a year is even pushing that a little bit. So to take that away from that, it does give me a little bit of animosity because we had already planned it.
Yeah.
We started that plan. We were focusing on, we're looking at buying hunts and fishing trips for that.
Down that area, yeah.
And now, scratch that. We're back to, we're going back to Nashville. Just tell us what you guys are doing. That's all we're really asking. And I think that's fair. I do think it's fair. You know, even if they would have said something 2 months ago, that would have been better. You know, don't let us come to the show and tell us at the last day that, hey, we'll see you next year. We're coming back to Nashville. What about the people who didn't attend Saturday? They came Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and they left town on Saturday. Now they don't know, and they're going to have to wait for that to come out in a publication.
But do you think that's been part of one of the big parts of the success of the Dallas Safari Club? Is they're based in Dallas? You know that every year, for some of us, it takes 2 years to plan. So we know now for the next 2 years, okay, well, now it's a little bit different because it moves up to Atlanta while they refurbish.
Yeah, a little bit of a different situation there.
But on a normal basis, do you think that will be one of the success stories of why DSC is so successful?
I do. I think everyone knows where it's at every single time. They know what to expect. They know the layout of the hall. Obviously, the Kay Bailey's being torn down and they're going to rebuild it. It's going to take 2 years, and that's why they're moving. When the new hall, I'm actually very excited for that because I do like the Dallas Safari Club show. I think the convention is it too can be very cold in Dallas that time of year, and it can also be very nice that time in Dallas. There's a multitude of things that you can do in and around that area. So if a person were to come in and stay, especially, you guys are the ones that always are my thought process, because you have the foreign people that are coming in to sell a hunt, and sometimes these shows are right on top of each other, and sometimes they're spaced out, where there's a little bit of time in between, so you can kind of take something in and then hit the next show. This year was actually, I think we're like damn near a month was the difference between the two. No, because they moved Dallas. Dallas was supposed to be the beginning of it, and I think it was actually on the 14th.
Yeah, we were out.
So yeah. So it was supposed to be like I think around the 5th, 6th or something. They bumped it back to the 14th, 15th, or 13th, 14th, or something of that nature. So it still was about 2 weeks away, but you have one of the largest livestock shows and rodeos in the country is right there in Fort Worth. So you have entertainment. You know, there's still good entertainment. I feel bad for them taking it to Atlanta. I'm not really sure what Atlanta is going to have to offer. This group and this crowd of people. I don't see that as being that type of crowd. They'll make do for 2 years. They'll be back to Dallas, and it'll be great. And that's where it's at. I mean, it's the same thing with Harrisburg. The Great American. It's always in Harrisburg. It's always been in Harrisburg. It'll always be in Harrisburg. Houston. What is it? The Houston Safari Club or whatever they call themselves. It's always in Houston. Having something to where they're, like I said, that solidification of where it's at is a good thing. I mean, we started attending SCI, Dad and I, I think we started attending in like around 2006. I think it was 2006 or 2007 we started attending, and we hit it quite a few times. I mean, it's not a terrible drive for us to get up to Reno, about an 11-hour drive or something of that nature. So it was still nice. It was actually a very doable show then. Obviously it was much, much smaller back then as well. And then, like I said, moving on to Vegas, it became a monster.
But they stand for First for Hunters, right?
Yes.
I've always wondered why they've never taken the idea or the proposal, and actually, if you look around those halls, the majority of the people, I'm not talking about the outfitters or the people that are at the show, that have got booths at the shows, but the guys that come and visit, there should be some sort of ballot or something that they could vote for where they would like it to be, because majority of those people that come there on a constant basis have been coming, like you said, for years and years and years. So they'll know where their personal preference would be. So having like a voting system, because I somehow think that even if they did move it down to New Orleans, I wonder what the thought process was about that,
Well,
are they trying to fill up where their chapters are, or?
Well, and that's very possible that they are trying to hit it where chapters are. To be honest with you, one of the items that has always just mystified me on that as well. Okay, you've got an organization that is built off of members, and you give your members pretty much no input on what we would like to see. It's almost like, hey, let's throw this out there, and then when they get enough backlash, they change it.
Yeah.
We saw that with one of the shows where, we were literally going to have to go from Dallas to Reno, I believe it was at that time, because it was still in Reno. But we had like
2 or 3 days.
We had 2 or 3, 4 days, something of that nature, to drive across the country. And when you're loading up a booth and you've just spent 3, 4 days, 5 days doing this show, do that, drive across country, and then do it all over again, it puts the hurts on some people.
Oh, yeah.
I think it also hurts the people who are going to go, because I can take, with my business, I can take 4 or 5 days here And then 2 or 3 weeks later, I can do 4 or 5 days over here. I can take 2 long weekends. But I can't really burn 2 full weeks back to back going to 2 different shows. So I have to choose which one am I going to do. And they both do offer different things. I mean, Dallas is a hell of a show. But they offer, well, obviously, a hell of a lot more Texas hunts than they do South African hunts. If I'm going to book the really obscure stuff around the world, Croatia, Turkey, and all these stand countries that you have out there, you really basically have to kind of come to SCI because you're going to hit 4 or 5. We were looking for roe deer, muntjac, and Chinese waterbuck. In this particular show, this time we saw 3 different people. I've seen, unfortunately in Dallas, I've seen that only be 1. And now you don't have an option, and it's always good to have that comparison. You learn something a little more from one person to the other. Having that option to choose from who you feel the most comfortable with is far better. And that's where SCI, when you're going outside of the country, I think SCI does a little better for us because there's more options there and more information. You might still see 1 or 2 of those same things at Dallas. It's just not more of it. So when I'm buying something, I want to have options.
What, for the people that don't know, what is SCI? What is Dallas Safari Club? What does it stand for? What does it do? I know it's an organization, and I know it's meant to look after the hunters, but what is the actual purpose of these organizations?
Well, obviously, conservation. Conservation and preservation. First and foremost, we're conserving our natural resources in animals. I mean, but we're preserving our traditions and our ways of life and what we came from. That preservation of the hunter it absolutely must be at the forefront of our mind, just as conservation is. Because what good is it going to do to keep this conservation and keep these animals, keep that portion of hunting alive if you're not going to have anybody to hunt? The hunter is what goes after these game, and it's a hand wash situation on that, because without that hunter, you would have never had. We've talked about this, and forgive me if I'm wrong on the actual animal, but I believe it was the sable. And sable was one of them, and I think wildebeest was another one, where the numbers, the black wildebeest, correct? Black wildebeest, yeah. They like just decimated, absolutely decimated, and it was because of conservation and groups like Dallas Safari Club and SCI and whether it be FASA, I don't remember who all was involved in the thing, but people coming together and saying, look, if we don't do something, this animal is going to go away, and we're not going to get it hunted. And that's the one thing that, and this all ties in, and this is where we have to be super careful, because this ties into the anti-hunting as well. These anti-hunters, they pump a ton of money into saving animals, but what they don't realize is the amount of money that they're pumping into it, most of it gets wasted, okay? And on top of it, they're uneducated in what they're doing. You can't just simply say, let's save the animal, because you end up with things where you have overpopulation, chronic wasting disease, and white-tailed deer, because there's not enough hunters. There's not enough being done to keep those numbers down. In fact, oddly enough, I don't know if I told you this. I just heard about this. Michigan, if I have this 100% correct, for next year, if you hunt a buck, they're giving you 2 doe tags, and they're requiring you, but not requiring you to fill those tags. They're expecting you to fill that tag without requiring you to fill that tag. So basically, they're telling you there's too many animals. Mm. And when you end up with too many animals, then you end up with starvation, chronic wasting diseases, things of this nature. And that too can be just as bad for the animal as being depleted. So, everything has to have a balance. And without that hunter and without preserving the hunt, what good does it do to conserve the animals? Mm. You absolutely must conserve that animal. It protection on the animal, protection of the hunter, and we're never going to get through to the majority of the non-hunters because they are so adamant that hunting is so bad. Mm. When the attributes are there, if they would just open their eyes and say, look, this is what we can have, this is what this should be, we'd be in good shape. I mean, they go down to the store down here, they go down to Whole Foods down here, and they spend $15 a pound on organic beef, when every damn deer out there is organic, and probably far more organic than what you would get out of the beef, and you're more hands-on with that process, which some people don't like it, and that's fine. I understand. Some people have a hard time in taking life and that sort of thing too. But you're also able to pick who's going to process my meat. Like I said, Jake, Gwen, and I went up and did this moose hunt with Each Mountain and British Columbia in November. Brought our meat back, dropped it off in Coeur d'Alene. I went with Charlie Daly's recommendation. Hey, use this guy. I think it was Scotty's meat or butchering, or Scotty's butchering, something of that nature. Phenomenal.
Jeez,
you've had it.
Yeah, that sausage we had was
the
really
sausages
good.
The guy made is out of bounds. And they're just a little mom and pop operation that you would never know, and that food is out of bounds. And I guarantee you, I'm sure it has happened at some point in time that some person has gotten E. coli out of a mom and pop place because somebody wasn't clean or that nature. But look at the full scale of the E. coli breakouts and the salmonella breakouts and all that in these mass production plants. Which one do you want? You can still get organic, but it's going through a plant, and you could still end up with E. coli.
Why has no one ever challenged the decision to process and then resell game meat here in the country? And that's to go back to these organizations, that's something I think SCI and Dallas Safari Club would have tried to do as best as they possibly can. Because if you look at it from a larger scale, do you think their opinion is it will hurt the hunting industry a little bit more, or will it actually benefit it?
I don't think it would ever hurt the industry whatsoever. I really, truly don't think it would hurt the industry. I think it would actually benefit the industry. When you open up the game market to people who have never had game, it's really hard. It's very, very hard because we're given these from the time we can start watching TV. We're bombarded with these liberal television spots, and Disney. Disney's the worst of the worst. I mean, you take you watch Bambi. Oh my God, they killed Bambi's mom. No, that's not how that works. That's not how that works. And actually, if you watch the story of Bambi, the guy's not even a hunter. He's a poacher. That's not hunting. But yet it's branded as hunting, and it gives us that bad side. But everybody thinks, oh my God, I'm eating Bambi. I'm eating Bambi's mom. And it's the thought process of eating something that you can relate a character to or something of that, or a fluffy bunny, we talked about this. One of the healthiest meats you can eat is rabbit. And rabbit is absolutely great meat. I've told you before, we used to raise show rabbits and that kind of stuff. Well, the type of rabbit that we raised was it was kind of a dual purpose rabbit. They were bred for their fur and for their meat production. And we ate a lot of rabbit, and it was extremely, extremely healthy for you, very good for you, very versatile. And guess what? The rest of the world eats rabbit. You can get it on a menu. You can sit down in Spain 2 day, 2 night, and have rabbit in a restaurant. But you know what? You can't in America because, jeez, that's Thumper. Oh my God! No, we're eating Thumper. We're eating the Easter Bunny. Oh my God, we're eating the Easter Bunny. It puts that thought process in your head that you can't eat that, and yes, you can. Yes, you can eat that. There's a few of the guys out there, and I don't. I'm not going to do it. If they so choose to do it, so be it. But there's been a lot of talk on Facebook about a few of these guys that are they're eating coyote. They're shooting coyotes and eating coyotes, and that one I can't do. The coyote just to me is just too much of a scavenger. I can't do it. That being said, I don't know if I would eat a wolf. I suppose, they tend to bring down their game a little bit more.
But the purpose of hunting those animals is for a different reason also.
Yeah, it is, 100%. 100%. But it's the stigmata of what this is, and that's how that is. To be honest with you, getting back to the question, do I think it would actually help? I do think it would help if we would open this up and stop this, because there are places, the Buckhorn. It's the Buckhorn restaurant in Denver, Colorado. They serve a multitude of game. You can get venison, elk, buffalo. We had buffalo steak the other night.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Yeah.
Pretty damn good, wasn't it?
Some of the best meat I've ever had.
Yeah, it's fantastic meat. I know that they were serving ostrich. It seems like you can get rabbit in there as well. I don't remember, but there's a multitude of wild game that you can eat. And once people start to realize, hey, I can't eat this, then they open their mindset and forget about what they're eating, and they run with it. And the real true sad part about it is, if you really think about this, the one person who gives them a damn the most about an animal living and dying really is the hunter. You see a person, they hit a deer on the road, right? They're not hunters, and they're like, oh, I hit this deer. Oh gosh, deer. They drive off. They continue with their day. It dampened their day. I drive by that same deer, and I'm like, oh my God, because I see what that animal represents in population. Especially in our area of Prescott. The mule deer. It's already an animal that is not as prolific as like the whitetail and the elk and that kind of thing. And to see a dead mule deer laying alongside the road, that represents 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 offspring that will never gonna take place now, because that animal's laying there dead. So we tend to be more sorrowful about that, knowing the life cycle of what's happening there. Also, I think that would push the government into allowing more of these game farms to come in, and I think be managed more properly, that we don't end up with game farms that have chronic wasting disease because there's 800 elk in a 5-acre pen or something of that nature. I mean, that's a little bit exaggerated, but I've been past some game farms where they are very much overpopulated, and you're going to end up with a chronic wasting in that issue. But if more people, and to be honest with you, that's where you're actually seeing is in the buffalo. You are seeing it in the buffalo, and you're starting to see it in elk now. Elk is starting to show up on menus in a lot of places.
Just a quick one, Pat.
Go ahead.
When you say buffalo, you mean bison, right?
Bison, yes, American bison. So, that American bison buffalo, if you will, it's in a lot. It became a big movement, and that happened back in the early 2000s. The late 90s, early 2000s. You started to see that shift where people stopped seeing them as the big fluffy cow in Yellowstone. They became a food source, and I mean, for God's sakes, Ted Turner, one of the country's biggest liberals, owns 2 ranches, one in Montana, one in New Mexico. Since divorcing the illustrious Jane Fonda, he is now allowed hunting to take place on these ranches. And then they hunt elk and buffalo and bison all across these ranches. And he's also serving them in his 2 restaurants that he owns, one right here in Nashville. If somebody wants to come to Nashville next year, you and I had it. It's quite good.
It's beautiful.
It was a great experience, and to me, I believe it was $45 for like a 14-ounce ribeye, and it was absolutely superb. I don't think you could have got a better meal anywhere else. So a little bit more money than a beef, but it was absolutely superb, and you can taste the difference in them. Most people, if you wouldn't have told them that it was buffalo or bison, they would have not ever realized that it was. But, and it was, like I said, in the late 90s and early 2000s, that's where you saw that switch in that. And I saw it in the hunting side of it, because I started to notice that the hunts on buffalo started to go up. And there became less and less hunts available. And we ended up hunting just outside of Grand Island, Nebraska. And I was talking to the guy that was guiding us, and he says, I said, well, how do you do this? Why'd you get into this buffalo hunt thing? And he goes, well, my granddad was actually a cattle farmer. And he said, with all the trouble with cattle farms and everything else, you just don't get any money for the cattle, and then they don't. The farmer and the rancher does not get the money that the meat producers do after slaughter. It's all the middlemen in between, and that's where the money's going. It's not to the rancher or farmer. And he said, we can control this ourselves because we're more specialized. And he said, I'm taking a beef cow, and he says, I'm getting 91 cents a pound on the hoof. And he says, I'm taking a buffalo bison or a bison bull, and he says, I'm getting, $2.50. And this was back in 2000 that would have been 2003, 4, somewhere in that nature. Okay. But he still loved to hunt them. So he kept a section of land, 660 acres, square mile.
Yeah.
And it was heavily wooded. It was actually a really fun hunt. It really was a fun hunt because he kept it very natural in there, and it was a hunt. It was fun. It wasn't a huge piece of property, but it was big enough to make it a hunt. Unfortunately, hunting buffalo is pretty much most of the time just a shoot.
Yeah.
So when you're hunting a buffalo, you really kind of drive out because they're really not afraid of anything. They're just going to stand there, you pop them. So, but he's the one that told me how that swing was, and now I've watched it over the last 20 years, and we used to be able to shoot. My dad shot I believe that was a 10-year-old. I think it was a 10-year-old bull. Big, massive son of a gun. Huge, massive. It was around 2,000 pounds on the hoof. And he shot that, and he was actually just a touch more than the going rate, and it was 5,000. That same bull right now would probably cost you at most of these places around here, 12 to 18,000 or more, depending on where you go. That's just that's the popularity, and then also the amount, because they're selling these animals to the slaughterhouses now. And it's easier for them to get the money. We even hunted with a place in Colorado, Elk Mountain Ranch is the name of the place. And they used to do a ton of buffalo hunts.
Mm.
And they've cut way, way back on the buffalo hunts because they don't have to do anything. They can load them on a truck, and that guy takes them, and he takes and handles all the processing, and he still gets $250 a pound.
Mm.
Whereas, when he was hunting them, he's getting $250 as it's laying on the ground. It's still on the hook, but he has to process the animal.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So now he's not processing the animal at all. He just loads it on a truck and he still gets the $250. So a lot of these guys are going away from doing the hunting side of it because it's so much more wanted on the meat production side. And I think you could see that, and you are seeing that with elk. And I think we could see a lot more of that with elk. And I think you take Texas into play. You bring in Access. Access is a fantastic meat.
Yeah.
Nilgai, another fantastic meat.
Good meat, yeah.
Oh, they told me with Nilgai that if I ate Nilgai, I'd never eat red meat again. I'd never eat cattle, and it's pretty damn good.
Mm.
It's pretty damn good, but you're not going to chase me off a T-bone. It's just not going to happen. It's pretty damn good, but both of them are very good meat. Sika, however you want to pronounce it. Very good meat. So there's a multitude, and especially Texas. My goodness, man! And so many other states around them are starting to see what it's done for Texas.
Mm.
Missouri has opened it up. There's quite a few game ranches in Missouri, game ranches in Oklahoma. Game ranches are starting to happen in New Mexico. Okay, it's happening in Montana, Wyoming, all Colorado.
That's why I'll ask the question is, are you not scared that it takes away from the traditional side of things, the open land hunting?
Oh, it does. It does.
So, that would be my biggest worry of it. But
and that's the problem, but you're always going to have that portion, and that's where that comes into the preservation of the hunter. We've talked about this before in previous podcasts. We've had this, and the preservation of the hunter starts with us as hunters.
Mm.
Okay, it's time to stop arguing about how we're hunting, what we're hunting, where we're hunting, and all these different things, and get together. Because if we don't get together, they're going to strip us one by one out of what we're doing. Okay, and that's really it. For God's sakes, you take these bow guys, Oh my God, are you shooting a recurve? Are you shooting a compound? Are you shooting mechanicals? Are you shooting fixed blade? Are you shooting a crossbow? Oh, you're a cheater, And and the things that I have read in the hunting societies and on Facebook and social media of how these guys tear each other apart. Mm. You know what? If the man wants to use a damn fixed blade at a compound bow, then by God, let him do it. Yeah. That's his. It's not affecting you one bit. It's not. Mm. It's not affecting your hunt. Mm. So let him do his hunt his way. Mm. It doesn't affect you. Back him on his play, because if he loses his play, it's just like our constitutional rights here in this country. When you strip one person of their constitutional rights, yours are the next. Mm. Mm. You can't tell this guy no and then expect somebody not to tell you no. Yeah. And it's the same thing with the preservation of hunting. You have to do that. It goes, muzzleloader. Mm. Is that, a true flintlock? Is that this? And, it's the same thing. There's 4 or 5 different types. Christ, now you even got some of these muzzleloaders that are shooting out 1,000 yards. It's crazy.
Yeah. And it's so true what you said, because it's happening in the fishing fraternity now in South Africa, is where the drone fishing, where the drones take the bait out to certain. I don't know too much of the backstory around it, but I do know that certain fishing entities are saying, oh no, but it's cheating, it's this, that, and the next thing. But cracks started developing, and now before they wipe the shit out of their eyes, there could be an issue around the whole fishing fraternity and not just drone fishing anymore. And that's what I worried. Yes. And a lot of things happen like that, like Cecil, the lion. Yeah. We're too worried about bitching and arguing between one another instead of actually focusing on what we need to look after. And that's the core, it's hunting, it's conservation.
Right.
and then cracks start forming, and these entry
Fishers,
hunters, they just fucking get in there and they just want to try and capitalize, and they're winning. They win in the battle on a constant basis.
They can divide us because if they keep us divided, we cannot stand arm to arm and fight them if we're not standing arm to arm. You know, and that's truly it. And that goes the same thing. You know, we're talking about not just the weapons that we use. Now, I will say, I love to hunt free range. I do. Anytime I can, I do. But guess what? There's some animals in this world that you're not going to hunt free range because it's not possible. It's just not possible to do it because it doesn't exist. That being said, I wouldn't say that you can't hunt a markhor naturally in free roam, but I think you'll see. I'm starting to see it now. Actually, the markhors are coming down in price in Texas.
Really?
Yes, they are. They're starting to drop in price. Okay, right now you have to go into a war-torn world. And, you know, these places, you know...
Because they're based in Pakistan?
Well, they're Pakistan, Nepal. There's actually about 6 or 7 subspecies of the markhor. And they are in some really rough... I mean, Afghanistan... You're not going into Afghanistan. I can't get in there.
Yeah.
You know, I can get into Pakistan, but I could lose my life. And it's... Where do you have to draw that line? And of course, then you add on the expense of that animal being, you know, to do a hunt on a markhor in some of those places is still $35,000 to $50,000. Yeah. That's just for the animal.
Yeah.
You know, so now you got to get yourself there and all the things that go with it. Texas, you know, in markhor were up around I think $35,000 to do a high fence. But I think I've seen some now that you're able to go like down and around that 25,000, and I think as they breed them in, and again, this goes back to sable. This goes back to black wildebeest. I mean, black wildebeest at one point in time, they were $15,000 or more to hunt a black wildebeest. They're $450. So that's what's going to happen, and because we're conserving and preserving, we're bringing the numbers back, and when the numbers get bigger, the supply is more, so the demand is still there, but there's so much supply that now it brings that price down. And it actually is a good thing because once the supply, first of all, can meet the demand and then can exceed the demand, then the prices start to come down and it opens up more hunting for a lot of other people. Yeah. Okay, I'm not going to drag my 15-year-old daughter into Nepal and to Kyrgyzstan or any of these other places. Not going to happen. I'm not doing that. But I would damn sure take her to Texas. And I know guys down there that have 1,500 to 15,000 acre ranches, and I can hunt on those. You know, 1,500 is a bit small for me. You know, I'm not super keen on that. The bigger, the better. You know, I like to give them a little more chance. But it's what's there. It's how we have to do this. And again, some of this stuff is just how it has to be done in order to be able to hunt these scimitar horned oryx, Arabian oryx. You're not going to hunt them in the wild. The Arabian oryx is almost extinct in the wild. I think the numbers are under 300 at this moment. Okay, Texas has around I think 8,000 Arabian oryx. Okay, so you're going to hunt it in high fence. Now, I'm not saying shoot it in a pen. I'm not saying shoot it in a pen. And I get a lot of people's, you know, mindset that, oh my God, you're shooting a penned animal. Okay, go into some of these. Open your eyes. Investigate it for yourself. Instead of sitting there bitching at the guy and telling him how bad he is and how wrong he is, well, by God, take your ass down there, buy a hunt, and go out there. And if you don't feel right, then don't pull the trigger. But I'll guarantee you, once you've seen some of these ranches and how tough that hunt is, you'll be like, oh, you know what? It's a pretty good hunt.
It's also, you know, like you said, it's more for the bigger picture. I mean, like you said, you're not going to take the risk into going into Nepal or the Congo to hunt a bongo or anything like that. And yes, you can argue that it takes away from the full experience, but the bigger picture is that if you're not hunting that Arabian oryx in Texas, if no one's hunting that,
There's no
what
reason to have it.
incentive does he have to keep them around?
There's not.
And at some point along the line, I want my daughter to see an Arabian oryx, whether she's hunting it or not. I want her to be able to see it. And if we aren't looking after it,
Because it's a beautiful animal.
it's a magnificent animal.
Yeah,
you know?
beautiful, beautiful animal. And and the thing is there's even most zoos don't even have them. Most people look at a scimitar. If you even had an Arabian oryx, most people associate it more with a scimitar.
Yeah.
And they think they're looking at a scimitar. They're not.
No, completely.
They're completely different, but that's what they think there is because they're not educated enough to know that there is an Arabian oryx. And again, education. That's where, and that is the one thing, SCI touts, we need to educate. Education. And they do. They put on a multitude of speeches. I've sat in on the Craig Boddingtons and the Shockey and other people and whatnot. I've sat in on these speeches and these talks to educate myself on things.
You don't think that's the problem,
But
because they're communicating to the fellow hunters, which majority of them by now have got the full experience. You see, one of my biggest things is, as I like to call myself a conservationist, but one of my biggest things is that I get disheartened and I get a little bit taken back by if an anti-hunter kind of labels me as uncompassionate about what we do, right? Because like you said, I'll be the first person to admit it. I hate taking anything's life, any animal's life. I hate it. It's not about that. It's about, for me, the bigger picture at the end of the day, like you said, and it's about the adventure. It's about the journey. It's about the experience, and I want to live a much healthier life with the meat and all that sort of stuff. But if I turn around and I tell a fellow hunter that, he'll understand me. But it's the education that we've got to take, and it's the point we've got to take. And that's why I hope like a lot of non-hunters actually listen to these podcasts, because if I'm educating them around that side of the curve, then more people are going to understand, well, hang on, maybe these guys are a little bit more compassionate. Maybe they are.
Oh, damn sure. I mean, man, I've never felt really good about myself in killing an animal. If you can feel good about the experience of being where you're at and all those things, but if you find joy in killing something,
you're a murderer.
It's a little bit different there. That's a different human being. That I think they call them sociopaths. I mean, okay, that's different. Okay, but I 2 years, almost 3 years ago now, almost died from COVID. We all know that. Okay, and 2.5 months later, I was climbing down the side of a mountain in Spain. And, for those who don't know me, and I'm 6'3", I am a big man. I'm about 340 pounds, okay? I'm still, bad knees and whatnot on top of it. I've got a left knee that needs to be replaced. And I'm descending down the side of a mountain that I can literally stand sideways, put my arm out, and at one point I can touch this mountain. Okay, so what are we talking? 3 feet, 3.5 feet. So you tell me the degree of angle of that mountain was. It was treacherous. It took me an awful long time to get down the side of this mountain, and it took me a hell of a longer to get back up. And I was wore out, laying on a cliff in bushes, and I shoot this absolutely fantastic Greedos ibex. And I was spent. I mean, again, I'm only 2.5 months out from being in a ICU unit, on oxygen. I mean, in high volume oxygen. They actually wanted to put me on a ventilator, but they didn't have one. So thank God they didn't have a ventilator. I probably wouldn't even made it out of there. But 2.5 months later, I'm on the side of this mountain, and I told him, I said, guys, he's further down in the valley. I said, if you guys would, I said, with where we're at with the day and everything else, I got to start going back up now. I said, I can go down there to where this animal is at, and we can take pictures and we can do all of this and so on and so forth. But I said, you're going to have to bring me a tent. I'm going to have to stay there for the night. I'm not going to be able to get out. And they kind of looked at me and they were like, you serious? And I said, I'm dead serious. I said, I know where I'm at right now. I'm in, and this is like probably 2:00 in the afternoon. It's winter time, so dark at 5:30, and I'm an hour and a half, 2-hour climb just to get out of this, and then a mile walk back to the vehicle in some really rough terrain. And I said, I got to go. And they said, by all means, go. So they went down to retrieve the animal, skin it, and all do what they needed to do. And I went back, and I got back to the truck right as pretty much dusk. We saw just a little bit of a glimpse of the sun tucked behind one of the mountains, and we had a beautiful sunset. And I sat there on a big rock watching the sun go down, and I was overjoyed. I was happy with what everything about that just happened. Okay, that I pushed myself, and knowing that I was in bad shape, and I still pushed myself to do what I did. Taking an absolutely stellar animal, but the actual killing of that animal was not part of that joy. Everything else was the joy.
Yeah.
And that's where these anti-hunters need to understand this, that we're not that way. It's about how we push ourselves and what we do. I wish sometimes that they would just come and see, and I have to give huge props to Stephen Ranella, Meat Eater, to take these people, and he's always one to say, you know what? Why don't you fellas join me? Why don't you join me? You think what I'm doing is so wrong and so easy and this and that. Why don't you come join me? Well, he made one hell of a hunter out of Joe Rogan. He's made a hell of a hunter out of Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan is absolutely passionate about hunting now. Wow. Because he had his eyes opened for just one brief moment. And he was able to say, you know what, I was wrong. This is not what I thought it was. And now he is going hunting more and more all the time. And you're starting to see that. I mean, you're seeing it, and I thank God. And I do at the same time, I worry a bit about famous people hunting. Because I think you're going to get a lot of people, and this ties in with one of my other big issues is corporate hunting. I'm not into this whole corporate hunting thing, where people are using it as a tax write-off to go and take their guys out there to just, mow things down and stuff. And that to me, there's some guys that are doing it right, and there's some guys that are doing it wrong. Sure. It's not about that. That's not what we are. It's not who we are. And there's a lot of famous, professional athletes, movie stars, on, that are getting into hunting. And I worry about their followers getting into this for the wrong reason. Okay? They're getting it, for God's sakes, some of these people vote how their famous icon votes. That's how brain dead they are. Snoop Dogg said I should vote for this guy. Well, do you know Snoop Dogg? Because what works for him doesn't work for you. It's a different lifestyle. Don't think for yourself just a little bit, and that's what worries me about that. You've got obviously, Brett Favre was a big one. Having Brett Favre hunting.
Who's Brett Favre?
He was the quarterback of the Green Bay Packers. Okay. He was a big one. Ted Nugent.
Yeah.
My God, who doesn't know Uncle Ted, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, having him out there, then having now I think you're seeing. Oh my goodness, I'm trying to think of Shaq. We talked about him the other day. Shaq's a hunter. He keeps it low key because he doesn't want to draw the attention to him, and that's At that same time, I see double-edged sword on that because I appreciate the fact that he's trying not to draw the wrong attention to himself, but also if he were to find the right outlet and the right people to talk to, maybe take some of those people hunting, he could show them what it meant,
Well, I think
and educate them.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's always the special part of it is that, and I think that's why Joe's got such a great team behind him with Steve Ranella, and maybe Joe's not the best person to reflect or project the essence of hunting and the backstory about conservation and stuff,
Right.
but his team behind him does it pretty well. So
Yes.
And I think, I always say if a young professional hunter hits me up on social media or whatever, and if he says, how does he get in to become a PH and stuff, I'll ask him a question. I say, well, what is the reason you want to do this for? And if in the first sentence or two there's no mention or understanding of conservation, I kind of deter them away from it, because you've got to understand the basic principles of what being a hunter, being a professional hunter actually mean. And conservation doesn't just mean the animal. It can mean the land. I mean,
Yes.
our greatest success, one of our greatest success conservation stories is our land. Is we look after our land for our hunting. And that's...
1,000%. Because it's all circular. It all revolves around each other. I mean, you can't conserve or preserve an animal without having the terrain, the house or the home for that animal to be in. And they're a wild animal. They thrive off of range, land. If you don't have the water, and this is where you and I have been involved in donating hunts to the Mule Deer Federation, Arizona Elk Society. And these are groups they're seeing that side of that conservation and saying, okay, what do we need to do to this? And they put their money where their mouth is. They put the boots on the ground. They get out there and they build the water lots. They work with Forest Service. They work with states, whether it be on Forest Service land, state land, and they even work on private lands. And they go to ranchers that have big chunks of land and they say, look, let us come in and build some water lots for the wildlife, and in turn, you allow some people to come and hunt, and they're opening that door, for a lot of hunters, who in the past have ruined hunting for other hunters on private properties because you get some shithead that goes out and he shoots the water tank because he thinks it's fun. Well, it's the desert, I mean, to see water pissing out the side of a tank, I don't know what joy you get out of that, but that's what our livestock, that's what our animals are drinking here. Our wild animals and our domesticated animals are drinking that water. Don't shoot the tank. Don't tear up the man's land. And and there again, that's where education. They're educating people on, guys, you see these things. This is what we can do. And believe it or not, I don't know if I've ever told you. I mean, we were actually hired by, I think it was funded through Arizona Game and Fish and the U.S. Forest Service. We built trick tanks back in the woods. And a trick tank is basically, there's multitudes of ways you can do a trick tank, but a trick tank, we went in, we built a great big huge brown tank, water tank. And then we built a roof over top of that, but we inverted the roof. So it's huge roof that goes all the way around this tank. And it captures the rain that falls, and it inverts it back down into that tank and holds that water. And then there's, float systems on the tanks and things like that allow that to feed it off into for the cattle and for the wildlife and that kind of thing.
Oh, okay.
You see a lot of... I'm not a big fan of the ones. There's a lot of them that they actually lay big sections right down on the ground. They're the easiest to make because you can go in and you can clear a little piece of land and lay stuff down. You don't have to erect anything, but you can lay it down and it runs down a hill, and it'll take sheet metal. I've seen them in concrete, old ones in concrete, where they poured great big huge slabs of concrete, and that water would run down, funnel into a tank that was further down the hill, and then further down the hill was the actual watering system for the wildlife. But some of these things were the size of, an acre. Well, an acre of habitat gone is an acre of habitat gone. Yeah. So building something up off the ground, and again, I am all for changing the world, but we have to do everything smart, and this is where the stupidity of people overrides common sense by the few, that we just can't get our way pushed through. I mean, man, look at the solar fields, look at the land, and it's starting to be talked to now. Because the amount of land that they're having to take and destroy to put in a solar field, that habitat, you how many animals have you displaced? I think in a 1 acre garden, if you tear up a 1 acre plot, I can't remember what it boils down to. It's like X amount of rabbits, X amount of mice, all this. I mean, and you start to look at what the death toll is. So even if you're a damn vegetarian. You've destroyed the habitat for an animal and you've displaced them. So don't think that what you're doing is great. We have to do everything properly, educatedly, in order to move forward. And again, I think, like I said, the trick tank and the solar fields, those are things that can take up a great deal of land. So, but that water's necessary.
Yeah.
It's absolutely necessary. Build the trick tanks. Get them up off the ground to where we can capture above something of that nature and still have habitat underneath them. And not only that, but we also found that in having these trick tanks with the inverted roofs, when it was quite hot, you would actually find a lot of wildlife would come in and use it as shade.
Shade, yeah.
Yeah, so they would or shelter from rain. If it was hailing, snow, all these different things, they would use it as a shelter as well. So I mean, that even though you're just taking a bit of land away from them, they still use that roof system as one. Whereas like the big sheet of concrete on the ground, it's just a sheet of concrete. Yeah. They can't utilize it for nothing other than the little bit of water. So, we need to find out what works best and do that.
Utilize it.
Yes, without a doubt.
But just shifting over a little bit, I saw you stopping in a couple of booths this past week. What's your plans for the year? What have you got coming up?
Well, starting in March for Lily's spring break, we're going to go up to Idaho. We're going to do the Snake River, do a little sturgeon fishing. Then I'm returning back to BC with Stuart in May.
What you going to hunt down there?
We're going to do black bear.
Okay.
I did my black bear with him last year. Taking Lily up to do a black bear with her. I'm actually going to return with him again in November and do a whitetail, and the mule deer is opportunistic. So if a mule deer presents itself, then I can do a mule deer.
What's his outfitting company?
Each a Mountain.
Each a Mountain.
Okay. Super nice guy. Yeah. It's rustic. It's not he does offer actually some horseback tent country hunts and stuff like that, but I think I'm past that in my life. You hit 52 and it kind of, you know what? I don't know if I want to sleep on the ground anymore. So, but he's got some really nice cabins, and you go out and you do your hunt, and there's always good food, home cooked food ready for you.
Are you hunting the bear off bait or with dogs?
No, the bear is actually spot and stock.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So last year,
when is this?
This is May
Oh, so
It's
you
gonna be
guys
the
come
second week of May.
into spring, right?
Yeah, they're coming out of hibernation, and I
Okay.
actually went up last year. And when I went last year, I was the first. I was in the first week, so it opens May 1st, and I was the first hunter.
Okay.
And there was a brother and a sister actually joined me about 2 days later. They drove up from Spokane, around the Spokane area, because they'd hunted a year or two earlier to retrieve a mounted bear, and then they also bear hunted as well. And it was still a lot of snow on the ground, and the lakes were still frozen.
Okay.
Yeah, so it was a very, very late winter going in up there. So it actually was a little bit tougher than what it normally would.
Yeah.
Because the grass just, and when they're coming out of hibernation, they're eating the grasses and that kind of stuff. And we still saw a great deal of animals. I mean, absolute great deal of animals. Actually got to see a wolverine.
Nice.
In the wild, and that was probably the coolest thing about the hunt, and everything about the hunt was cool, but that was probably my most favorite thing, was seeing a wolverine, because the chances of seeing wolverine is just it's like seeing a ghost. You just don't see him, so getting to see that, the bear. The one bear that I shot, he actually it's a 2-bear area because they have so many bear.
Okay.
I think I only hunted 3 days. I hunted 3 days and I was done. It's a 5-day hunt, and that's the amount of bears that they have. It's just really, really densely populated with black bears. So, being able to see 25 bears in 3 days is a substantial thing. And and to see how these bears react when they're coming out of hibernation and that kind of stuff. The bear, the first bear I shot, actually, this dude, he was sprawled out on the ground, laying flat out, and it was kind of army crawling across the grass. And he's just taking his head, turning his head side to side, and plucking fresh grass coming out of the ground. He was just eating, and he's just crawling across the ground he's like a living lawnmower, man. He's just mowing grass down. And he had no idea we were even there. We were able to sneak in. I think we took about a 160-yard shot. So it was quite cool. We saw some moose, saw a few deer, a lot of bird. I actually got to see a really, really nice golden eagle.
Nice.
And I know how you are about birds. And this dude, he was big. Man, that thing was massive.
That's the biggest predatory bird in the world, huh?
Yeah, I think he is. I don't know that for certain, but I do believe that is correct. But he was standing in a field just 30 yards off the side of the road. And we sat there and just watched him, and I was so damn dumbfounded I never even took a picture of it.
Yeah.
He was so magnificent, and just to watch him sit there. And the people in the area were just wonderful, wonderful people. Okay. Everybody was super helpful. Ranchers, farmers, all that kind of stuff around. Great outfit. Had a good time. So that we're gonna do the bear. Then we're
fishing.
I got the fishing thing, like I said, in Idaho. That's sturgeon fishing. So the guy says we should be able to do sturgeon. He said definitely do sturgeon. He said trout will be good. He said we should still be able to get some steelhead trout.
Okay.
About that time. So I'm hoping for that, because I'd always like to catch a nice steelhead. But I'm going after the sturgeon. The sturgeon is the one that I've always wanted to do. A really nice sturgeon.
Massive fisher.
Yeah, oh boy, prehistoric. Just absolutely beautiful fish.
But it's not indigenous yet to America, eh? Or is it?
Oh, it is. Yes.
Okay.
Yep. And actually, there's quite a few. There's quite a few areas that hold sturgeon, and they're different in different areas. And I don't know enough about it. Again, I plan on educating myself about this as I'm fishing this year. My uncle actually hunts. He fishes sturgeon up on the Rainy River of Minnesota.
Okay.
And it's still a very good sized sturgeon. It's not going to be, these 12, 14-foot sturgeon and things like that you're going to see in the Columbia and the Snake and all these different rivers. But there's a good number of sturgeon, very good number of sturgeon.
Are they edible?
They are edible. Smoked, I've heard that smoked sturgeon is phenomenal. This is a catch and release only. In the state of Idaho, you cannot keep a sturgeon. Mm-hmm. So, and rightfully so, they wiped them out.
Yeah.
They were trying to keep them, bring them back. So, conservation, keep that conservation thing going. But, and let's see, in June, I don't know, I'm thinking something south of the equator. See what's down on the underside. I don't really know what I'm going to do yet.
Yeah.
But thinking something down there. Have some options. I have an option to go to Australia. I have an option to go to Africa. You got to weigh that out and see what works best. Lily actually has she's in junior ROTC or whatever they call it. So she's been invited to go to Washington D.C. for some conference. So that plays into that factor a bit. Other than that, then we were looking at trying to do. We're going to do a little family trip the end of August over it's a cruise out of London. Cruise out of London that goes over to France, down around Spain, and back up to London. So I was thinking about trying to put something together for muntjac, Chinese water deer, or roe deer, whatever would work. But so far I haven't gotten enough figured out for that. So possibly a hunt on that deal. I don't know. We'll see. And then I got to figure out, because I do have in scheduling, I kind of made a little bit of a bungle. I scheduled a cruise over top of an antelope hunt in New Mexico. So that somehow I got to figure out how I can move the hunt. So hey, maybe maybe I can't move that, and we can see who the conservationist is of the year, and they win an antelope hunt in New Mexico from me.
But man, I know we've got dinner scheduled with Charlie in there.
Yes.
So we need to take that into consideration. So, but once again, it's always a pleasure having you on the podcast. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge, and I love chatting to you. I mean, we've had 4 weeks of just some good chats, and
it is
problem solving, and I love it. And thank you for everything you've done. Thank you for everything you've done for me, and I look forward to having you on the podcast in the near future. Very, very, very soon.
Yeah, I'll definitely be back. One way, shape, or form. We'll do another one this year, and bring up some more topics of what's out there and what's about there. But in the meantime, the only thing I can say to the people out there in Podland, seriously, man, stop fighting with. Am I off? Yeah.
Yeah, keep that. Yeah.
Okay, so stop fighting with each other.
Yeah.
We've got a big enough fight in trying to preserve our way of life. So stop fighting with each other. Come together. Let's save the hunt. Let's save the hunter. Let's save the animals. Let's have fun. Let's educate each other. Let's love one another. Carry on.
Yeah. My friend, thank you so much.
All right, buddy.